So hello from Green-Mopeds in London. So today we're going to follow up on our ride review and speed test of this Horwin SK3 with a side-by-side comparison to its nearest competitor and probably the bike that it was built to win over. And it's the Super Soco CPx. So we're going to do what we normally do, go around the bike, show you some of the features and differences, and hopefully that will help you make an informed decision. So let's get to it. Okay, so probably not a lot to repeat about the companies themselves. Super Soco been here for, well, since 2017 at least, when we started, and Horwin I think was starting about 2018, 2019, both out of China. Super Soco were historically known for motorbike style bikes, but their CPx sort of caught the wave of the Geteers and the super fast grocery delivery market, whereas Horwin have really only now just brought this bike out to sort of counter that. What we'll do is we'll go round and show you some of the sort of differences and similarities between the bikes, and we'll start off at the front with an obvious one here, that the CPx is 16-inch wheels and the SK3 is 14-inch wheels. Some people prefer larger wheels for stability and dealing with potholes, for example, but lots of bikes these days have at least 14-inch wheels. NIU have pretty much standardised on them, although they do have one bike that is still 10-inch. I guess as long as you're over 12-inch, then you're probably okay. In terms of the actual dimensions, the CPx is a little bit longer, but that's partly because of the included rack. There is a rack coming for the SK3, and also one of the other things to notice is how the seats are set up. So on the CPx, you'll see, if you actually look across, the actual seat is quite wide. Okay, you might not get it from this view, but it is quite wide. Okay, and we have had some people, because it doesn't, although it looks like it's going to narrow off, it still stays quite wide at the front. We have had some people who've sort of struggled a little bit with that, because it does actually keep your legs quite far apart. On the SK3, it's a little less. I wouldn't say it's a lot less, but it is a little less. Obviously, the SK3 has gone for a sort of standard idea of one seat for both people, whereas on the CPx, they've gone for this extra pad. In actual fact, V-Moto Super Soco, there is a specific delivery version of this bike called the VS1, which doesn't even have this. And the reason that you do that is so that when you put a load on it, you can put the top box or whatever it is as far forward as possible. So on this bike, what we have actually done, in fact, when we put a very large top box on this, we end up putting the top box over here, because you want to keep it over the wheel as much as possible. Okay. Obviously on the SK3 you don't have that, and as I said, there is a rack coming for it. Okay, so in terms of weight, the CPx is heavier. In actual fact, the SK3 is 107 kilos with the battery inside, one battery, whereas the CPx is 107 kilos before any batteries are put in it. Batteries are about 18 odd kilos, and obviously that's an extra weight to carry around. Okay, so 107 kilos for the SK3 with batteries and 107 for the CPx without batteries. Okay, in terms of size overall, they are pretty similar. As you can see, the only real difference is the included rack, and there will be a rack available for the SK3 at some point shortly. Okay, so that's the front. In terms of style, you know, it's up to you which one you prefer, but note both have lights in the body. So we've talked about this before in terms of, do you want lights in the body or do you want lights in the handlebars so that the lights turn when you turn the handlebars? But both of them are the same. Okay. Note where the indicators are on the SK3 and note where they are on the CPx. Okay, so not saying one's going to be better than the other, it's just that they've chosen to do it differently. Note that the SK3 has noisy indicators, which the CPx doesn't. Okay, but not self-cancelling. All right, so as you can see, really, the SK3's body and overall shape is a little lower. Okay, so that's really just a reflection probably of the smaller wheel at the front. On the CPX at the back, you do have a smaller wheel. You have both 14-inch wheels on the SK3, front and back. And note the first major difference is that on the SK3 you have a 6.3 kilowatt mid-mounted motor in here with a chain. As you probably saw or heard or didn't hear on the ride review, it's remarkably quiet for a chain-driven bike. Okay, on the CPX you have a 4.8 kilowatt max hub-mounted motor on a single swing arm. So this is an interesting feature of the CPX, in as much as you can quite easily take the rear wheel off if you need, because you just literally undo these 4 bolts and then the wheel slides off. You don't have to muck about with the cable. Okay, so when you change rear wheels or rear tyres on electric motorbikes, often what you have to do is you have to muck about feeding through a cable if you have a hub motor, but they've got around that by making it on a single swing arm. Obviously on the SK3 it's more of a traditional setup. You've got a chain, you have to take the wheel off, take the chain off, etc, etc, but you don't have the hassle, if you like, of feeding through the cable. Okay, so slightly less convenient than doing it on the CPX, but not as bad as doing it on a hub motor bike. Okay, so you go decent shocks on it on both the bikes, but obviously as there's only a single swing arm, no shock on this side, so it's a single shock setup, which again some people might say, well, that's not going to be as smooth over bumps or dealing with bumps as much as a bike with 2 shocks, but you'd really probably have to compare it to see. Okay, all right, so that's some of the stuff. Now let's go to another little interesting difference. Here you see on the SK3 under the seat you do actually have a space for a helmet. Whoops. On the CPX, even though you have space, it's not the shape for a helmet. Okay, so if you're not doing deliveries and stuff like that and you want a bike that you don't want a rack for, and we do get people who say you'd rather not have a rack, then as long as you've got an open face, because we've tried it with a full face and it doesn't fit, you could put a helmet into the SK3. Okay, when the dual battery or the final version comes out, there will be 2 cables for the dual battery setup. Both bikes can have a dual battery setup. Okay, so as we're here, let's talk about batteries. So as you can see here, this is a 72 volt 36 amp, and that is a 60 volt 45 amp. As we talked about before, the way to work out maximum capacity is to do the maths. 60 by 45 is about 2.7, 72 by 36 is about 2.6. Okay, so on paper, you should get more miles out of a CPX. And the typical range of the CPX quoted is about 40 miles per battery. Okay, so literally on paper you won't get that out of this battery, especially bearing in mind that this is a 6.2 kilowatt motor and that is a 4.8 kilowatt motor. Okay, so if range is the primary reason for you taking one of these bikes, then unless you go for the dual battery version of a SK3, the CPX should win out. Okay, but obviously you've got this convenience here. Okay, so let's talk about charging time. So this is the charger of the SK3, and you note it is, if you can see that, 8 amp, okay, from a 220 volt output. The CPX is 15 amp. So subsequently, the quoted charging times from flat of these bikes is 4.5 hours on the SK3 and 3.5 hours on the CPX. Okay, even though it's got more capacity. As we say, if you double the amp hours out of your charger, or the amps out of your charger, you halve the time. So merely on the fact that they have a 15 amp charger versus an 8 amp one will mean that it will be quicker. Okay, Horwin might have considered bringing out a 15 amp charger for it, I guess, which could have helped. Okay, so looking at the dash, it's quite a clear display. It's got your time, your state of charge of one battery, the second battery would be underneath, odometer and trip. As with other Horwin bikes, you can only put it into ready, you cannot take it out of ready once you press this button. Okay, so that's something to be aware of for when you get back. The throttle will still be active. If you stop riding, don't forget that the throttle will still move if you're moving it around for whatever reason. Okay, and then around the dash you've got the ability to turn on the main lights, because the side lights will always be on, and then you've got your full beam and dip beam on here. Okay, reverse, which on these bigger bikes they sometimes add in reverse, and then you've got your hazards and your horn. Behind here you've got, if you can see it, probably not, in here you have got a USB port, okay, which might not be visible, but anyway, it's in there. All right, and then a bag hook, quite a lot of foot space, actually more than a CPX, which might be useful for some. As we've said, there are, on the ride review, there's actually 3 ways of starting this bike. You've got the fob on its own, you've got the proximity of the fob, okay, so no key, but I can just press the button and turn it on, okay, and then you've got the key. What we said before is you should really pick an option and stick to it, okay, as in don't mix and match, don't start it with the fob and then put the key in and start it with the key as well. Some of these bikes get a bit confused about doing those sorts of things, just something to be aware of. And then once you put it into ready, you just pick your mode and off you go. Interestingly, this didn't make so much noise when you're riding it, okay. What I've been told is that there is some software updates for the controller of this bike to make the acceleration a bit better than you might have witnessed on the ride review we did the other day. Okay, just some other things. So you've got your charging port down here, that's to charge one, and then I guess both batteries when the dual lead comes out. On a CPX, it's similar but different. Here we'd have your A and your B batteries. Okay, obviously this is your B battery, your A battery is that one. Okay, and then you've got your ability to go in and out of ready, or as in activate the throttle, you see ready, etc, etc. And then you've got a reverse gear on this, and then your modes here, and you can pick and choose your modes as you wish. Okay, and then you've got silent indicators as we saw before, and then your ability to turn on the main beam, etc, etc, and the horn as you just heard. Here is your USB port on the outside, which some people would say is actually a better place to put it, because obviously if it's on the inside you have to feed a cable through. Not insurmountable, but just something to be aware of. And then you've got your foot space, which as you can clearly see is less than on the SK3. Okay, in terms of things like colours, you have black, silver and grey on the CPX. Silver and grey are pretty close in terms of colours. The main distinguishing feature is that the silver has a silver stripe and the grey has a yellow stripe. On the SK3 you have this colour, which is sort of like a graphite. You have a sort of champagne colour, which is quite nice, and then a sort of metallic blue. Okay, I think in China there is actually a black, but for some reason they've chosen just to bring over this one over here. Okay, they are both on the grant, so you get 3 years on the battery and 2 years on the bike. The interesting thing about, I guess, is the price. So probably deliberately, I would say, Horwin have priced this bike at £400 less than the CPX in either mode. Oh, sorry, guys. So the single battery version is £300 less, as in 3349 versus 3749, and the dual battery version on the CPX is 4799, and this dual battery SK3 is 4349. Okay, so they've obviously done that to get people to take notice of the bike. All right. Obviously, you'd have to add possibly a rack, and which is, as I said, coming. There is also talk about a big screen or bigger screen for the SK3 if you want one of those, but even so it's still going to be cheaper. So in summary, the CPX will win on range. simply on the maths and the fact that it's got a lower powered motor. Speed is the same, weight is lighter for the Horwin SK3. You've got some storage on the SK3, or usable storage, let's say, on the SK3, which you don't have on the CPx, both on the Grant, and a £400 advantage on the SK3. So hopefully that's been useful. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions, and please, well, although the bike's not available for 4 to 6 weeks, I would suggest pre-ordering, simply because when the bikes turn up, they probably have already been allocated to dealers. And hopefully that review's been helpful, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Green-Mopeds, and thanks very much.